Happy Saturday afternoon, everybody. So I've been like patiently waiting on to give everybody a chance, but of course I have to start by saying spoiler alert. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. If you haven't watched the series, you're gonna know what happens. There's no way to talk about it without having that conversation. So, but I knew that I had to at least give people a chance to watch it if they want to. So it's a new series on Paramount. It's got Joshua Jackson. Um, Damn it! How come I keep forgetting her name?
It's the
girl. The Mean Girls girl. Yeah. She was like the gothy girl.
She's a really cool name. It's hard to remember.
I know. I'm trying to Google, and my computer's going to go slow. So he plays Dan, and can you Google it for me real quick? If your computer's operable. So mine is going to take its sweet ass time.
Lizzie Kaplan.
Yes, let me write it down because I will forget Lizzie.
I thought her name was...
How come I can't remember Lizzie? Like with Izzy, and then we got Lizzie. See, she thought we said her name. She's like, huh? What do you want? Mm-hmm. What's your last name? Kaplan.
Kaplan, yeah.
Yeah, so she was like the goth girl in Mean Girls. And I thought she looked familiar, but it wasn't until you said that. And then I think I looked her up on the internet. So I'll start by saying I think she did a great job playing Alex Forrest, right? So she was the Glenn Close character. Joshua Jackson was Michael Douglas's character, Dan. And then the series was interesting in how they did it because it was kind of two time periods, okay? So first spoiler alert, it starts with like Dan in a parole hearing, okay? So in the movie, you know, we don't see anything about what happens after Alex is killed in their home while she's trespassing and has gone super psycho. So this series starts with him there. So that's already, listen, and I will just start by saying I thought the series was great until the last episode, and then I was just sort of, I don't know, confused or let down or like, I don't know. But what happens from there is there's like the flashback in time and then back to current day. So that happens throughout the whole thing. And then the way they did it is it was a lot of the same material that showed up throughout the episodes, but from different points of view. And that was unique and interesting and kind of a new take on the movie too, because of course in the movie we're just mainly seeing things, you know, from this kind of bird's eye view. Whereas this, we're seeing things from Dan's point of view. Then we see things from Alex's point of view. Then we see things from Beth's point of view. So the wife, Beth, is played by Amanda Peet. But then there's some new characters in here as well. Okay. So let's see how I want to start this. First, I'm going to put a link in. Anybody who's seen it, who wants to talk, feel free to come on up. So essentially in this movie, she's died. He's done 15 years for it. Oops. I don't know why I'm sharing this. You guys don't need to see that. Because I hit it instead of invite. He's done 15 years, but then as soon as he gets out, we find out that his position is he didn't do it. So there's this mystery element that they kick in right away. So it's kind of loosely the original story. Only he's done time now for something that he didn't do. And a lot of the series is based on trying to figure out and solve the mystery. Here we go. So it delves a lot more too into Alex's mental health. It delves a lot more into Dan's mental health. And that part I found pretty fascinating. All right, JT, have a good one. I know you're like, you've lived this. I want to quit my job, but I can't. Yeah. Adulting. Let me see what you guys are saying. Close's father was a doctor and she wanted death scene to be performed exact. Oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. See you later, JT. Have a good rest of your day at work. Hope it goes fast. I did not know that. See, this is the thing, all right? The movie's iconic. I mean, there's just no getting around that, right? No matter what anybody thinks of the movie, and I think it's rare you find people that aren't into the movie. But I'm telling you, like, in a whole new way, you get it sucked in to this sort of mystery. And so one of the new characters is Dan's good friend who is a police officer. And it starts with him being, so we're kind of finding out, they do kind of the how he ended up in this affair, right? Even in the movie, he seems to have a good marriage. They did the same thing here. But what's happening here is we get a little more of his backstory. And his dad was a DA, and he's expecting this judgeship because he's kind of a legacy. And long story short, he doesn't get it. And that's what sort of kicks off this sort of questioning of self and crumbling. They just bought a new home, which of course that's part of the movie too, where they move. So he gets involved with Alex. A lot of it's the same, but only we get to then see Alex's point of view, where we find out it's very contrived. So she's caught his eye, and she goes out of her way to sort of manufacture these events that they've had. So think back to the movie. It would be as if she meets him by rando at the party thing. In this, she's also works in the courthouse. Okay, so she's like a victim's advocate in the courthouse building that he also is a lawyer in, where it's a little different in the movie.
He's a well-known lawyer.
Yes, so he's like the tits of his town. So this would be as if Glenn Close found out where he ate lunch every day and intentionally plopped her ass there to just accidentally run into him, kind of thing. So in this one, we see she's, intentionally running downstairs to wait at an elevator she knows he just got on so that she can randomly be the one that walks into it. She starts a fire in a restaurant in the series so that the sprinklers go off, causing everyone to get wet, to get him into her home, where they, for the first time, do the deed as he's drying his clothes, right? So the other new character in this, though, is Beth in this series is an architect, an interior designer. Okay, so her college buddy, she starts a business with, and we see, and he has a wife that is dying of cancer, so he's kind of a caretaker. Okay, and so she's really good. Both these couples are very close friends, and after Dan goes to prison, he elects not to interact with his family, which they never really kind of flesh out the reason why. But we keep seeing these scenes where it looks like maybe Beth is remarried. And for sure, his daughter calls the guy dad, okay? You find out that this guy is the same guy later on as they delve into the friendship, right? So spoiler alert, Zen, if you don't want to know anything about the series, if you haven't watched it and you plan to, it's on Paramount Plus, you guys. Definite spoiler alert.
Kenny's trying to spoil more of it for you.
So you get the impression by the end that it actually ends up being more of a platonic. So these guys just really have this deep connected friendship. But here comes the spoiler of spoilers, you guys, right? Plugging along and everything's really interesting and it's all interesting. But then the last episode starts and he ends up being the killer.
Yeah.
This guy that had nothing to do with the original, because you really just don't know, right? So it's just suspense. There's 8 parts to the series, and it's like suspense, and you just don't know what's going to happen. Who could it possibly be? He's doing this whole investigation and petition to get a new trial, and doing all this investigating. This friend of the family never came up. This is the guy that has raised his daughter and all these other things. So yeah, my dog's name's Kenny. So it's just this rando, right? It's like he didn't have like a massive part in the series even. So it was just bizarre. And so I'm like, well, that's a little disappointing. And they show that he goes to a lawyer because because Dan's such this hot shit prosecutor that he assumes that he's not going to get convicted. His wife, who was, on her deathbed and things like that, decided, they as a couple had decided to pay for his defense with their life savings because there was life insurance money that would come once she passed. And, they're just such close, they're like family, these people, right? So, so it did bring up this little interesting little element when you're done watching where you're like, well, maybe that was because he felt so guilty. But, he talks to a lawyer who's like, no, just take care of your wife. There's nothing you can do. But he's like riddled with guilt after this conviction. So that was the first, like, the fuck. But then there's this other piece, which is the daughter. And why can't I think of her name in the movie either? Let's see. The daughter in the attraction. I want to say Emma, but I don't think that's right. Ellen. I was kind of close. I got the E right. All right. So Ellen, of course, we're seeing as a young kid. And then again, now she's like a young adult. She's off at college. So that is a very interesting element of the entire series and just the story. It ends up being pretty important in general in the series because we see her over in college and she's very psychology oriented. She's a psych major. She works for her professor who also is her advisor. And she like transcribes all his lectures and things like that as her way of, earning extra money through college. So she's always studying. She's always listening to psychology. It does find this kind of creative way to make the extra psychology of all these different episodes where we're seeing things from different people's point of view. It did kind of weave that common thread, so she's kind of, and you see the after effects, right? Because if you think about the movie, we see her as just a little girl. And this is interesting when you're seeing, okay, so fast forward, because we don't know what happened after Alex was killed, but we know in the movie she loses, she knows that something's going on with her family and there's traumas that happen to her through it. So it does a good job of fleshing out their life after the fact. So she didn't have very many friends. She kind of makes a friend, like this kind of mysterious college girl who she finds out. She kind of befriends her. And she's got a little dark history to herself. Long story short, she's like, the friend is like bumping uglies having this affair with the professor. And you see her in her, going to therapy and things like that, where, you can tell she's suddenly very, at the same time, she's trying to come to peace with her dad and the past of what's happened. Now she's faced with, here's this other person who's essentially doing the same thing to his family. Okay. All this is out there. She's kind of intrigued, I guess, with the notion, and she's friends with the girl. So she's doing different things to try to disrupt what she's doing. She's keeping tabs on it, and she ends up getting this chick kicked out of college based on some confidences that were given to her. And so it's like, you're like, yeah, so she's clearly got daddy issues. She's got a hang up. Okay. Another super spoiler alert. And one of the things that bothered the shit out of me. Have you guys seen the movie Mr. Brooks? It's Kevin Costner, the Kevin Costner.
I've never seen it.
You did. You watched it with me. It's with the one where he's a serial killer.
It must have been a year or two ago.
It was, but it's the one where then at the end, like, she kills him because it turns out she's a serial killer too. She got the gene,
right?
She got the gene. Well, here's what fucking happens and how the shit ends. So already you're like, ugh. But at least when they oust this rando best friend guy who has nothing to do with the fucking movie and really has not been central enough.
Very Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, it's like, wait, he did it?
You're the guy we met in the very first few minutes.
He did it? Weird. Okay, so then he never came forward and nobody cares now. Okay. But then we cut to you're thinking it could work out in this last half hour of this 8-hour series, End scene. Okay, here we go. Here we go to daughter. Okay, so Ellen's sitting there as she's been for a lot of the movie, listening to her professor's recording at her computer. Yeah, at her computer, where we assume she's still transcribing. And instead it cuts to her screen and you see that she's parsing it for some reason. And then all of a sudden she hits play and it's a bunch of parsing that she's done.
Assembly editing
That's telling her, that's him saying, I have never met a woman quite like you.
Right.
You are.
She assembles her own love letter from him.
And she gets this weird ass fucking creepy smirk. And then all of a sudden, with her headphones in and you can still just hear this playing, she looks up and there's the professor. And then as soon as she removes her little thing, he's like, why are you in my house? Now that could have been a decent ending. I think right then that would have made it at least a little thought provoking. And it would cause people to go back and think through everything they just saw. But instead, she gets up and she's like, gives this creepy little look. And she's like, you seem mad at me. Are you mad at me? Which is something that Alex had said.
Right.
And there's this cutback scene to when Alex kidnaps her. So in the movie, she's kidnapping her to go to the fair or whatever. Here, they just went to the park and got cotton candy and walked around. But it shows Alex giving her this life lesson. You know?
It's sort of implying that they're cramming together, which is a contradiction of nature versus nurture. She's hanging out with somebody.
You picked up on that.
They're dispensing all this Jungian psychology about a bunch of bullshit just to make sure you've got Carl Jung's name in mind.
I didn't. Hold on, because October Sugar has something. Ellen's new friend went missing. I didn't. Oh, that's right. Yes, she did, because then she suddenly popped that. Because when she pops up, she's confronting her about, so somebody's getting me kicked out of school.
The psychology thing,
Yeah, she has to go back home because she can't stay. Because she had
eliminating her as a teacher assistant.
She was eliminating her as a fucking love interest. That's what going back. It's like, okay, this wasn't so much about daddy issues where she's like, oh my God, you're doing the same thing that destroyed my life.
Yeah.
It's like, no, bitch is fixated on the old guy. That's what you find out kind of in the end. But they end it in this really fucking cheeky way. I mean, they're
implying that she's naturally just been that way. And somehow randomly out of the billions of people in the planet, she ends up being quote unquote mentored by another person that was naturally that way.
They had one little conversation, but I think actually what they're trying to go for is that somehow this triggered her into just becoming the exact same way that Alex was. It was a fucking cliffhanger. It's about leaving it open for a part 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked when you said Scooby-Doo ending, because that whole fucking last episode was a Scooby-Doo ending. And I'm telling you, I was roped in and I was just all into this series and binged through it, I think, in like a day and a half. Any little spare moment, I'm going back up.
And then we're like, no, let's pull your mask off and see who you really are.
And I'm like,
oh, you're the guy that no one really noticed the whole time.
It's in the end, it's like, the daughter has been damaged from this to the point where she's now the psycho stalker that's stalking her teacher or her professor, who is old enough to be your dad. And the dude who killed Alex is the impression we're given is it's platonic, because you see
it was so caring towards his own.
Yes, this last dinner thing that they do, or this dinner where it's the first time that Joshua Jackson is like, joining this whole, what is essentially used to be his family.
Yeah.
But it's like, you see, he's still close and has a good relationship with the guy. You get the guy's been friends with Dan's best friend, the cop, the whole time. You know, so it's like, it is this sort of thing. And what you see is all these little looks back and forth. And you find out that Ellen or Beth has thought that he's innocent the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you get this impression like, no, they're all still in love and stuff, but this guy stepped in to raise the daughter and to be the companion, and they're just kind of doing life. You do leave with this impression that it's somehow platonic, but yet he's the one that fucking killed.
What would have made it cooler is if that guy
Mm-hmm.
would have been who the daughter fixated on.
Oh, that would have been a little Freudian, don't you think?
Well, they were already going with that. That's why I say Jungian is just a blanket term.
He's catching on to these
there was
things.
the psychological nature versus nurture shit ending that was not accurate. You can't.
Angela, I didn't catch that, but maybe
TV.
you're smarter than me. And I have a low level degree in, you know, behavioral health oriented shit. You know, it was like counseling, so I had to learn a lot of the psychology stuff for my associates. But I didn't catch all this Jungian versus, because the whole time you don't really think that this is significant. Hearing all this background stuff, and you get that she's kind of fixated with psychology.
Right.
So that's what I think what they were meant to do, right? Which I think it would have been better if they didn't have her have this sudden weird change of her facial expression and have her repeat exact lines that that had been said by Alex in the movie towards her dad. Because that's where it was like, ugh, if they had ended scene right as she takes her headphones off and he's like, what are you doing in my house?
Right. Where you
that
go, this whole time she was in his house.
And you know, that's some of the beauty of these kind of like mysteries. That's what I like about movies and series and things like that, where the longer you sit with it after you've watched it, you're like, oh wow. No, I mean, was she fucked up from her dad? Or, you know, like the psychology part, you're like, no, she was actually just fixated on the guy. I mean, that's something that you could have come to on your own had they actually just left you with that. But instead, they add this like, she's turned out like Alex sort of thing, but it was just so very cheesy, and it didn't quite fit in with the character that they built the whole entire thing. But the thing that instead you end with is, oh, well, shit, there's going to be a part 2.
Totally. And that was...
So that was the main difference, you guys, is that, so a lot of the things were, there's a lot of liberties that were taken. Okay. So things didn't play out exactly the same, but her death is one of the things that was one of the major deviants from the movie.
Right.
In that she did come into their home, but they had it where she came in, or she was going to come in, but the mother-in-law, so Beth's mom, the wife's mom, was there taking care of the dog while they did something. Essentially, they have Alex kill her mother-in-law, like his mother-in-law.
Yeah.
And somehow he just knows that it had to be her. Okay, so that was kind of the build-up instead of the bunny. And so she's dealing with her mom dying, and that's when all of a sudden he decides to tell her about the affair, which is true. See, so where the bunny was the catalyst for him to tell on himself the first time, the death of her mom is the catalyst this time. They had like a little throwback to the bunnies, but it had nothing to do with bunny boiling, right? I like the bunny boiling thing. Maybe they thought that was going to be too much to put in there, because I was kind of waiting for that, and that never happened. So then Dan goes to see her. We don't ever see if he killed her or not. That was the whole point, is we don't know who killed her. But I guess the way it was supposed to happen is that, you know, Beth has her meltdown over it. It's, of course, the same day she lost her mom. And so this compassion overwhelmed this friend. I don't know. I just feel like there's these things that could have been done better. And I felt they set up this big thing, and it was like, oh, it was just awesome until then, right? It was that last episode that just fucking made it all to where I'm like, now I don't know what I think of this.
Yeah.
Are they going to do a part 2? Are we going to see his daughter be in Stock Arena, or is that just how it's going to end, you know, with like, oh, look, I mean, literally, okay, this is honestly to me how it felt. And if you saw it, let me know if you thought this too. October always, if you're here. It was almost like, because they did the whole like look on her face. I mean, the whole affect on Ellen's face changed in that last like 10 seconds of the series, right? It's almost like she's channeling Alex, you know? And I'm like, that's the part that I'm like, ugh. And I just, like, when talking to Crafton about it, and I had him watch the last episode, I'm like, don't you think it would have been better if they just stopped it when she took her headphones off?
Yeah.
Because that at least is like, oh shit, oh crap, you know, and it leaves all these
what's going down,
this like really integral, because like I said, the psychology, her listening to all these,
well, it would leave that psychology up in the air.
Yes,
by her walking over and acting like that, it does it.
Well, you find out she's in his house.
She's
broken into his house. She's sitting in his house. You don't know that at the time, because thinking back, you don't ever see her in her own environment. You don't know. I mean, we assume she lives at home, but
there is a gray area. That's a third kind of argument. There is that she's grown up since having known that woman, and she was already, when they flash back, they were already discussing the same thing all excitedly, you know, and this animal and that animal, yeah.
But the conversation.
So she could have been like learning and then traumatized, and then the daddy issue and everything sort of turn her into it as she's lived through that experience. But at the same time, that thing was so heavily legal based, like
which is why I love it. I'm telling you, the elements, even if you haven't seen it, and now I've kind of spoiled the end for you, right? Like, it's worth watching because it is. There's just this like legal thriller. It's almost this like, you know, Clancy-esque. Like, it's good, right? Like, the shit was good, and I was ready to be like, oh, this last. I was so excited for the last, because I'm like, this is it. Like, of course we're gonna have to find out something, because his new trial got denied. So we're like, okay, so what's going to happen now? Yeah. You know, and he's deciding he's not going to go for it. But then you got his daughter pressing him that he should go for it. And they have this huggy moment that feels like closure. And that's why I'm like, it could have been really ominous if they hadn't done this kind of mental fuck that did feel very Scooby-Doo like. Yeah. Where all of a sudden she's got these crazy eyes that you've seen Alex have for half the show, and then she's repeating her lines. Yeah. Are you mad at me? Like she has no idea that.
I feel like you're mad at me. Like talking like they're already dating.
Yes, like sitting in the house isn't wrong. It was just far-fetched. I found it far-fetched. And I'm like, I wish they had fleshed out this surrogate, because I can't even say stepdad. They never tell us if they were married, and they did leave us with this impression at the end, like, no, this is somebody who just really, this was his family too. You know, it almost doesn't even matter if they got married or, you know.
Oh, voices, horse thingy happened.
Oh no! Did was the horse born?
Is it a boy or a girl? Oh, I guess they already knew.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it threw me off too. I was like, wait, really? Like, so the Ellen part, but then also him being the killer. I was like, well, I didn't see that coming. And it does make me wish, in retrospect, because I'm less mad at that than I am at this little last 10 seconds and what they did with the Ellen. Because I'm like, okay, so if they are gonna come back and do like a part 2, I feel like they left this big old question mark where it's like, it went from, because for all we know, she could have just gotten fucked up. Something could have been shaken loose. Like, she's dealing with her dad getting out of prison and her mom in this little situation that we find out she's kind of in later, where she's giving these loving looks to Dan over dinner, while the guy that's raised her kid, and that she's so and that's where it's like, to me, I take away that they're totally that it's platonic, you know? Because you see the guy notice it, and he doesn't seem to care. He seems a little bit like happy. It's like he just wants her to be happy. Right. But we're supposed to think this whole time he's never told anybody other than this lawyer. I mean, because there's a little fucked upness in that too, isn't there? That you killed this person for your friend, and her husband goes to prison for it, and you never speak up.
Right. Yeah.
It's a little
that's a little ulterior motivated.
And you just step in out of the kindness of your heart, and that is what the takeaway was supposed to be. I went and watched the behind the scenes like interviews too. Yeah. because I was so curious. I'm like, well, I want to hear what the director was thinking and all this. And she did want the takeaway to be that he's this very compassionate caretaker kind of guy
who thinks that killing the person that
he's just trying
busted up.
Yes, because he doesn't want to see anything else
deal.
bad happen to the people around him. Every day he's dealing with his wife dying and taking care of her needs.
He wants to take care of.
He wants it to be okay for his friend.
But then he wants to be the caretaker for Amanda Peet, letting the guy.
Well, we don't ever see that. So
I understand that. I'm saying that's what's implied is that he has some type of misguided attraction to caretaking of Amanda Peet.
Yes.
While the other guy sits in jail, so he's got his psychological string of
it's like we're
misguided motivation,
and it would have fucked him up. I mean, it's just you just got to think that it's not a normal person that does that because we know she died after Dan goes to prison because they do have a scene at like his wife's funeral.
Yeah.
And at that point, and by the way, she's the only one that Amanda Peet eventually confides in that she had a suspicion of him cheating and stuff.
Yeah.
And who this person is and whatever. So, but at the funeral, we see Dan's best friend. And this is like Band of Brothers, kind of very close friends, like his kind of mentor. They're just thick as thieves. They both know where the bodies are hidden metaphorically, that kind of thing. And we see interaction between the two of them. And it's confusing. And it's why I'm like, I had to talk about it. And I'm like, I'm going to be spoiling for people who hadn't seen it, but I want to give people a chance to see it before I did this because I'm like, overall, I think it's like worth watching. But just be prepared that it's like the whole thing is so good. And then the ending, it just didn't live up to how great they did the rest of it. It felt like almost like I don't know, like a throwaway sort of thing.
Well, it's definitely everybody's thing now is to try to get another deal with whatever streaming service they're on. And so, can we extend another 8 episodes, 10 episodes? They want to eke out as many episodes as possible.
Right.
And so if they don't closure all up, all the lines up, that's kind of the trade-off now with movies themselves becoming less the objective and binge watching series and wanting to crave more of that actual series. So,
but that's the thing, though.
No matter what, you're definitely going to watch it when it comes back out again.
But that's the thing. But I'm not going to cry if they don't come back out.
Right.
And I'm like, listen, okay, just to close this one up. All right.
Fucks the thing.
Listen, I was like Joshua Jackson fucking fan, okay, because I was like a Dawson's Creek fan, and I was like, Pacey's hot, blah blah blah. But even then, I was kind of bummed out at the end. I'm like, wasn't this called Dawson's Creek? Really? She ends up with Pacey in the end. So I'm like, how many fucking shows is Joshua Jackson gonna do in his career that are like the bomb that end with like what? That's what I was thinking. I'm like, stop it. But and I think they turning nuts. That's kind of where they took it, right? I feel like there would have been this psychological question mark if we had just seen and been left with, oh shit, she broke in to this professor's house. Like she's sitting there making little verbal love notes to herself. Like we would have mentally, all of us that watched it would have gone back and started understanding that, when we saw that, that wasn't her necessarily, or maybe she was trying to just get things solid in her own mind to understand how it happened, but somewhere in the way she cranked sideways and now is fixated with this guy. But instead they made her nuts, and somehow she's nuts, but they've managed to portray her as this vulnerable, like young woman who's kind of isolated and her own thing and trying to come to terms. And then you find out, oh no, she's apparently what I believe they were trying to paint out as borderline and psychotic anyway. So long story short, it didn't outperform the movie in my mind.
I had to go.
I know.
Do you need?
Hold on 1 second, guys. Let me mute. Believe me, it's not a DA and a judge calling me. Hold on 1 second.
We're getting a call from the caps.
But I don't know. You might want to look and see. Because I haven't.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, guys. He has work coming up, so.
Yeah, we better.
He has to
don't
bail
tell
soon.
the DA.
Don't tell our haters that he has work. Yeah, see, I would have been here and had.
Don't tell the DA and the judges. They'll conference call
it.
some people.
Oh, you didn't hear the Supreme Court's picking up her citizens complaint, you know?
Yeah.
Call Clarence Thomas. Hey, Tracy. Yeah, it was just so. Crafton's the one who said, he's like, it's like a Scooby-Doo ending, and I'm like, oh, you know what? You're right. It is. It's very like.
Well, the Scooby-Doo thing is the gray-haired old dude turning out it was him killing. That's essentially
like the background. No, because the background.
But then they double down on it with that.
The background character was always the.
The old man from the haunted amusement park. You know, like, we only saw you for 30 seconds in the very beginning.
Totally. No, when he said it, I'm like, you know what? You're right, because I remember as a kid. I used to like picking out like who was going to be the one in the Scooby, and it was, and you just knew it was always going to be that rando background character. But I just felt like it didn't do it justice here. Hey, Xana. The gray-haired owner of the amusement park. So there might be a second part to the series. I don't know. I wouldn't, and that's why I'm saying the reason that I'm like, yeah, because I'm like, I'm not really necessarily caring if they do or don't. And here's why, all the investment as a viewer that they had you emotionally put into Ellen, the daughter, both as a little girl and as a young adult trying to overcome like this very traumatic life that we find out she's had since, they sort of undo at the end. So suddenly we're supposed to think of her as this like bad guy. And if their goal was for us to start to think of Alex as less than a bad guy, they failed. It was like too late to spring it on us. That was the surprise.
I'll be right back.
Okay, love you.
Oh,
she's hearing her name. But the acting was good. I thought the acting was really good. The story itself was really good. But I still prefer the movie. Anyone hasn't seen my skunk llama baby in group, go watch a skunk llama with her 9 babies crossing the road. Is adorable. Aw. I haven't seen my squirrels today. The cups are empty, so I'm assuming they've been here already. But I don't know. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to get going. Crafton's running to the store, but then we got to get him to work. I'm back at 6 with Aiden. He got to pick the show topic. So we're going to catch up with him because he's packing. We've been packing and getting everything ready for him to go back to dorms, which we do tomorrow. And then he was listening to my Danny Masterson stuff. And he's like, it's the 18th anniversary of Michael Jackson's acquittal. So because Thomas Mesereau's in some trouble on the Masterson case. So we're talking about Michael Jackson. That's his the 18th anniversary of his acquittal. That's Aiden's topic he picked. And then I'm sure he's going to talk about whatever he feels like. I essentially, when he said he wanted to do a show with me, I'm like, well, you can pick the topic, whatever you want to do. So 6 o'clock Eastern, so roughly 2.5 hours from now. So that'll be interesting. Anybody who's ever seen Aiden will take a show wherever he wants it to go. And he doesn't, the apples don't fall far from the tree. So we'll see how. I don't know. I'm just getting ready to be embarrassed because he likes to do that to me. So if you're free and you're around, it'll be a low-key kind of thing. Should be fun. I will remind everybody that Michael Jackson and legal injustices are two things that Aiden's always had kind of special interests in. So, of course, he knows everything in and out. I'm fully preparing that I'm going to get schooled on the in and outs of the Michael Jackson case by my own son. So putting my humility out there now. So if you're around, I will see you then. And thanks everyone for coming in for this non-YouTube drama stream. And if you haven't seen it, again, it's on Paramount Plus. You can watch it for free. If you haven't been a Paramount viewer, there's a 7-day free trial that you can, if you have Amazon. So on Amazon Prime Video, you can do a 7-day trial. And as long as you cancel it from your laptop before the end of the 7 days, you'd never pay a penny. So if you're interested in seeing it, it's there. They also, likewise, if you have Amazon Prime, have of course made the movie available free to Prime members now too. So if you just want to watch that and you haven't in a while. And I will see you guys here shortly.